I sat down at the kitchen table at 9:12 a.m. on a Friday because my legs simply refused to hold the weight of my body anymore. I didn't faint. I didn't scream. I just sat. And then I stayed there. 15 minutes earlier, the morning had been aggressively normal, filled with the chaotic energy Robert always brought to a Friday before a boys' trip. He was rushing around the kitchen, looking for his sunglasses, doing that frantic tap dance he does when he thinks he's late for a tea time. He was wearing his lucky lemon yellow golf polo. It was bright enough to signal aircraft, and frankly a bit tight across the midsection. He's been convinced for months that he's gaining muscle mass, though I know it's just the craft beer and late-night pasta. "Martha, honey, did you pack my allergy meds?" he shouted from the hallway, hopping on one foot while trying to put on a loafer. "In the side pocket of your duffel bag, Robert." "Same place as always," I said, not looking up from wiping the counter. He grabbed his travel mug and took a swig of the green kale smoothie I'd made him. He grimaced, a quick, violent shudder, but swallowed it down. He hates kale. He thinks it's rabbit food, but he read somewhere that it boosts testosterone, so now he drinks it with the dedication of a martyr. It's almost funny, watching a 62-year-old man try to bargain with biology while wearing pastel sportswear. "All right, I'm off," he said, checking his reflection in the microwave door one last time. "This charity tournament is going to be a beast. Don't wait up on Sunday night, I'll probably be exhausted." He patted Barnaby, our fat orange tabby, on the head. Barnaby didn't even open his eyes. That cat has never respected Robert, and honestly, Barnaby is the best judge of character I know. Then, the garage door rumbled shut, the Toyota Highlander backed out, and the silence rushed back in. I stood up to clear his mess. Crumbs on the counter, a wet spoon on the table, a receipt from Costco he'd left near the fruit bowl. That's when I saw it. His iPad. He'd left it propped up against the napkin holder. He must have set it down to adjust his watch, and in his excitement to get to the golf course, walked right out without it. I sighed. I reached out to turn it off. I wasn't snooping. We didn't have passwords on our devices because, frankly, neither of us was interesting enough to have secrets. Or so I thought. Just as my finger hovered over the power button, a banner notification slid down from the top of the screen. It wasn't a text from his golf buddies. It wasn't a weather alert for the weekend. It was from our bank. Alert. Wire transfer completed. $185,000. Destination, Cayman Holdings Limited. Balance remaining, $412. I stared at the number. I blinked, waiting for my eyes to adjust, thinking maybe I needed to clean my glasses. Maybe it was $185 for a new driver? Maybe it was a glitch? But the numbers didn't change. $185,000. Our retirement. The money for the leaky roof. The money we saved for 30 years. Gone. Transferred to an offshore account I had never heard of. Robert hadn't forgotten his iPad because he was in a rush. He had forgotten it because he was arrogant. He was so confident in his escape, so sure of my blindness, that he didn't even bother to clear the screen. My knees buckled. I sank into the chair, the wood hard against my back. The refrigerator hummed. Barnaby stretched and yawned on the rug. The Friday morning sun continued to crawl across the linoleum floor. Everything was exactly the same as it was 5 minutes ago, except now I was poor, and I was alone. I looked at the half-empty glass of green smoothie he'd left behind. He was worried about his testosterone. I was looking at a screen that told me I had just lost my entire life. I didn't call him. I didn't cry. I just sat there, watching the screen go black, listening to the terrifying sound of a weekend that would never end. The silence was broken not by a sob but by a dull thud. Barnaby, impatient with my existential crisis, had swiped the silver spoon off the table. He looked at me with judgmental yellow eyes, then at his empty bowl. To him, the collapse of my 30-year marriage was irrelevant compared to the delay of his morning kibble. "All right," I whispered. My voice sounded rusty, like a door that hadn't been opened in years. "All right?" I stood up. My legs were shaky, but they held. I filled the cat's bowl, listening to the familiar rattle of dry food. It was a mundane sound, a tether to reality. I wasn't dead. The house was still standing. The Toyota was gone, but I was still here. I needed a brain that wasn't currently short-circuiting with panic. I picked up the landline, we still had one, mostly for telemarketers and emergencies, and dialed the number I knew by heart. "Brenda?" I said when she picked up. "Don't ask questions, just come over, and bring your reading glasses, the strong ones." "I'm in the middle of a Zumba video, Martha. I look like a wet tomato." Brenda panted on the other end. "Robert transferred the retirement fund to the Cayman Islands." The line went dead. 3 minutes later, Brenda's back door slammed open. She lived next door, a chaotic whirlwind of a woman who had survived 3 divorces and a hip replacement with her sense of humor intact. She was wearing neon pink leggings and holding a half-eaten coffee cake. "Move," she said, bypassing pleasantries. She didn't hug me. She knew that if she hugged me, I would shatter. Instead, she marched to the table and stared at the iPad as if it were a bomb she needed to defuse. She adjusted her glasses, which hung on a beaded chain around her neck, and squinted at the screen. 185,000. She read aloud. She whistled, low and long. "That's not a mistake, honey. That's an exit strategy." "He went to a golf tournament," I said, feeling foolish even as the words left my mouth. "He was wearing that yellow shirt." Brenda snorted, pulling out a chair. "The lemon yellow polo? Martha, when a man over 60 starts dressing like a highlighter pen, he's not playing golf. He's peacocking." She tapped the screen with a manicured fingernail. "Did you check his email?" I don't know his password." "He left the iPad unlocked, didn't he? Men like Robert don't use passwords because they think they're smarter than everyone else. Check the trash folder." Amateurs always delete the evidence but never empty the trash. I hesitated. My finger hovered over the mail icon. It felt like an invasion, a violation of the unspoken treaty of our marriage. "Do it," Brenda commanded, taking a bite of her cake. "He stole your roof money, Martha. Privacy privileges are revoked." I tapped the trash can icon. It was mostly spam, offers for Viagra, political newsletters, LinkedIn updates. But right at the top, deleted at 8:15 a.m. this morning, was a confirmation email from an airline. "Flight 402, St. Louis to Las Vegas, 2 passengers." "Vegas?" I whispered. "He said the charity tournament was in Lake Ozark." "Vegas," Brenda corrected, reading over my shoulder. "And look at the second passenger name. It's just listed as guest, no name." Clever, but not clever enough. She looked at me, her expression softening for the first time. "He's not coming back on Sunday to tell you about his golf score, Martha. He's coming back to pack the rest of his things. Or maybe he's not coming back at all until his lawyer calls you." I looked around my kitchen. The sunlight was hitting the wall where we marked our daughter's height when she was growing up. The pencil marks were still faint on the doorframe. "He thinks I'm stupid," I said. The anger was starting to replace the shock. It was a cold, hard knot in my chest. "He thinks I'm just the woman who irons his shirts and makes his kale smoothies." "Well," Brenda said, wiping crumbs from her lips and looking at me with a fierce grin, "are you?" I looked at the iPad. I looked at the forward button on the email. "No," I said. "I used to be a bookkeeper, Brenda. Before I was a wife, I knew how to balance a ledger." "Good," Brenda said. "Because we have 48 hours before he lands. Put the kettle on. We're going to audit this son of a bitch." Robert's home office was the one room in the house I rarely entered. He called it his sanctuary. It always smelled of lemon polish and self-importance. "It smells like Old Spice and secrets in here," Brenda muttered, pushing the door open with her hip. She was holding a steaming mug of tea like a weapon. The room was aggressively organized. The mahogany desk was clear, save for a brass lamp and a copy of The Art of War positioned perfectly in the center, likely to impress guests who never visited. "Where do we start?" I asked, standing in the doorway. I felt like a burglar in my own home. "The drawers, Martha. The locked ones," Brenda said, marching over to the desk. She tugged on the bottom drawer. "Locked." "Of course, he locks his tax returns but leaves his iPad open in the kitchen. Men are visual creatures, not logical ones." She pulled a bobby pin from her chaotic bun. "Hold my tea. My second husband was a locksmith, or maybe he was a burglar. I never really asked." While Brenda fiddled with the lock, I walked over to the bookshelf. It was lined with business biographies and leadership manuals that had pristine, uncracked spines. Behind the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I noticed something tucked away. I pulled it out. It wasn't a secret ledger. It was a box of Just for Men beard dye. dark brown, and a receipt for hair plugs from a clinic in Tulsa. He told me his beard was getting darker because of the kale smoothies, I said, holding up the box. A dry, humorless laugh escaped my throat. He's been lying about his follicles, Brenda. If he lies about his hair, what else is he fabricating? Click. Got it, Brenda announced. The drawer slid open with a smooth hiss. I put the die down and walked over. The drawer wasn't full of cash. It was full of manila folders, color-coded. This was the Robert Wasesnu, meticulous in his organization, even when organizing his own betrayal. I reached in. My hands, which had trembled in the kitchen, were steady now. This was paperwork. This was data. I knew how to read data. I pulled out a red folder labeled Project Sunshine. That sounds cheery, Brenda said, peering over my shoulder. I opened it. Inside wasn't a brochure for a vacation. It was a loan application, a home equity line of credit, HELOC, on our house. My eyes scanned the document, skipping over the legalese to find the numbers. Date, 3 weeks ago. Amount, $120,000. Status, pending spousal signature. And underneath that, another document. A power of attorney form. I remembered 2 nights ago. Robert had brought home a stack of papers after dinner. Just some insurance updates, Martha, he had said, smiling that charming smile. Standard stuff, just sign where the sticky notes are. I had been tired. I had almost signed them, but the pen had run out of ink, and I said I'd do it later. He tried to get me to sign away the house, I whispered. The realization hit me harder than the bank transfer. The money was theft, but this was an eviction. He was going to take the loan, take the cash, and leave me with the debt and no home. Brenda went quiet. The humor drained from her face. She looked at the document, then at me. He didn't just want to leave you, Martha, she said softly. He wanted to bankrupt you. I looked at the mahogany desk, the fake intellectual books, the hidden beard dye. It was all a facade. My husband wasn't a powerful executive. He was a con artist, and I was his longest-running mark. He needs my signature, I said, my voice hardening. The loan hasn't gone through yet because he didn't get the signature. I looked at the shredder in the corner of the room. No, Brenda said, reading my mind. Don't shred it. We keep it. Evidence. I'm not going to shred it, I said, closing the folder and clutching it to my chest. I'm going to use it. He thinks I'm a confused old woman who ran out of ink. He doesn't know I'm the one who did his taxes for 20 years. I turned to Brenda. Do you still have that friend who works at the county clerk's office? Brenda grinned, and for the first time that morning, it was a dangerous smile. Doris? Oh, she owes me a favor. She hates Robert ever since he criticized her potato salad at the block party in '09. Call her, I said. We're going to put a lien on my own house before he does. Leaving the house felt like walking onto a stage without a script. The sunlight was offensive, too bright and too cheerful for a woman whose retirement fund had just been airlifted to the Caribbean. I climbed into the passenger seat of Brenda's 2012 Honda Civic. The car smelled of vanilla air freshener and wet dog. The back seat was a graveyard of yoga mats and reusable grocery bags. Buckle up, Buttercup, Brenda said, shifting the car into reverse before I had even closed the door. We're going to catch a ghost. Brenda drives like she drives her life, with aggressive optimism and a complete disregard for lane markers. We swerved out of the subdivision, passing the manicured lawns of neighbors who were probably worrying about crabgrass, not embezzlement. I envied them. I envied their petty problems. We arrived at the county administration building 20 minutes later. Brenda parked the car across 2 spaces, right next to a sign that said, "Reserved for Employee of the Month." You can't park here, I said, gripping the dashboard. I pay taxes, Martha. Technically, I employ them, she replied, grabbing her purse. Let's go. The waiting room of the county clerk's office was painted a color that could only be described as bureaucratic beige. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. We took a number. 42. The screen above the counter blinked 15. I sat down on a hard plastic chair, clutching the red folder against my chest. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I felt like everyone could see the invisible scarlet letter on my chest, wife of a fool. Across the room, an elderly couple sat together. The man was asleep, his head lolled back, snoring softly. The woman was reading a magazine, but her hand rested gently on his knee. Every few seconds she would pat his leg, an unconscious rhythm of comfort. My throat tightened. That was supposed to be us. The boring, comfortable silence of two people who had weathered the storms. I looked down at my own hand, bare and wrinkled. The diamond on my ring finger suddenly felt heavy, like a stone dragging me underwater. "Don't do that," Brenda whispered, nudging me with her elbow. She offered me a lint-covered peppermint from her pocket. "Do what?" "Look at them like they won the lottery." For all you know, he snores like a tractor, and she's reading articles on how to poison him with antifreeze. I let out a small, watery laugh. It wasn't a real laugh, but it broke the spell. "Number 42, a voice rasped over the intercom. We walked up to the counter. Behind the glass sat Doris. She looked exactly as I remembered from the block parties, a small woman with hair the color of steel wool and spectacles hanging on a chain. She was currently eating a yogurt with the enthusiasm of someone serving a prison sentence. "Doris," Brenda boomed. Doris looked up. Her eyes narrowed, then widened. "Brenda? Is that you? You still owe me a Tupperware container from the Christmas potluck of 2018. "I'll buy you a factory full of Tupperware if you help us," Brenda said, leaning in. "We need to file a notice of interest and check the deed on the Miller property, right now." Doris paused, her spoon hovering midair. She looked at me. She saw the red folder. She saw the pale, tight set of my jaw. Doris had worked in this office for 40 years. She knew what a woman looked like when her world was collapsing. She didn't ask questions. She didn't ask about the Tupperware. "Give me the parcel number," Doris said, pushing her yogurt aside and cracking her knuckles. "And tell me he didn't try to forge the notary seal." I hate it when they try to play artist. I handed over the papers. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't just a victim sitting at a kitchen table. I was a woman filing paperwork. And in America, paperwork is a weapon. The house felt different when I returned. It was no longer a home. It was a crime scene where the only casualty was my trust. Brenda had gone back to her place to monitor the perimeter, which I suspected meant watching her soap operas, leaving me alone with the silence. I walked up the stairs to our master bedroom. I needed to see it. I needed to understand the man who could smile at me over coffee while secretly liquidating our past. The room smelled of him, that crisp, slightly metallic scent of expensive cologne, trying too hard to mask the smell of aging skin. I opened the walk-in closet. It was a monument to Robert's midlife crisis. On the left were my clothes, sensible knits, floral blouses, comfortable slacks. On the right was the wardrobe of a man who thought he was 35. I pulled out a pair of jeans from the back rack. They were slim fit, stiff, with indigo dye, looking like they had been designed for a teenager in a rock band, not a 62-year-old logistics manager with bad knees. I held them up. The waist size said 32. Robert hadn't been a 32 since the Reagan administration. "Oh, Robert," I whispered to the empty room. "You can't liposuction your soul." I pushed the jeans aside and saw the leather jacket. It still had the tag on it, $500. He had bought it 3 months ago, worn it once in the living room, squeaked every time he moved, and then hid it here in shame. I wasn't angry at the clothes. I was embarrassed for him. It was pathetic. But then I looked down at the floor. In the corner, beneath his rack of Italian loafers, shoes that were too narrow for his feet, but he wore them because they looked executive, was a cardboard box. It was jammed under the bottom shelf, acting as a prop to keep the heavy shoe rack from wobbling. The shelf had broken years ago, and instead of fixing it, Robert had just shoved something under it to level it out. I knelt down, my knees cracked, a sound that echoed in the quiet closet. I recognized the handwriting on the side of the box. Sarah's Art, Grade 4. My breath caught in my throat. This was the box of drawings our daughter had made the year before she got sick. The watercolors of sunsets, the charcoal sketches of our old dog, the hand-painted macaroni frame. I had been looking for this box for 2 years. Robert had told me, "I think we put it in the attic, Martha. Don't worry, it's safe." It wasn't in the attic. It was here. Being used as a wedge. A shim. A piece of garbage to hold up his expensive, uncomfortable Italian shoes. I felt a heat rise in my chest that had nothing to do with menopause. This wasn't about the money anymore. It wasn't about the lying or the secret bank accounts or the condo in Miami. It was about this. With a sudden surge of strength, I grabbed the heavy shoe rack and heaved it up. The loafers tumbled off, sliding across the floor in a chaotic heap. I didn't care. I pulled the box out. The cardboard was dented on top where the shelf had dug in. I dusted it off with my sleeve, my hands trembling. I opened the lid. There on top was a drawing of a house. Our house. With a smiling stick figure mom, a stick figure dad, and a giant yellow sun. He had crushed our son to support his vanity. I sat on the floor of the closet, surrounded by his fallen shoes and his skinny jeans, clutching my daughter's drawings. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I stood up, holding the box like a shield. I walked out of the closet and placed the box gently on the bed. Then I went back, grabbed the slim-fit jeans and the squeaky leather jacket, and threw them into a pile in the hallway. I was done curating his image. I was done protecting his ego. Just then, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It wasn't a text. It was an automated alert from the home security system app. Front door camera. Motion detected. I frowned. Brenda wouldn't knock. She would just barge in. The mailman had already come. I picked up the phone and looked at the grainy video feed. A car had just pulled into the driveway. It wasn't Robert's Toyota. It was a sleek, black sedan with tinted windows. A man in a suit got out, holding a briefcase. He looked at the house, then checked a clipboard. He wasn't a delivery man. He looked like an appraiser. Robert hadn't just listed the house. He had scheduled a viewing. Today, while he thought I would be out grocery shopping, I looked at the pile of Robert's clothes in the hall. Then I looked at the stranger walking up my front path. "Well," I said, smoothing down my shirt. "You're early." The doorbell rang, a cheerful two-tone chime that felt mocking given the circumstances. I took a deep breath, patted my hair into place, and opened the door. Standing there was a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory for real estate agents. Shiny suit, shiny teeth, and a clipboard that he held like a shield. "Good afternoon," he said, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Kevin from Tri-State Appraisals. I have a 2:45 appointment with Mr. Miller. I was told the property would be vacant." He trailed off, looking at me. I was wearing my gardening cardigan and holding a cup of tea. I definitely did not look like vacant. "Mr. Miller is currently in Vegas," I said pleasantly, stepping back to let him in. "Or as he calls it, a charity golf retreat. I'm Mrs. Miller, the one who actually lives here." Kevin hesitated on the porch mat. "Oh, I wasn't aware. Perhaps I should reschedule?" Mr. Miller was quite specific about the access codes. "Nonsense, Kevin. You're here now. Time is money, isn't it?" I ushered him in. He stepped into the hallway and immediately stumbled. His polished dress shoe caught on the sleeve of Robert's leather jacket, which was still lying in a heap on the floor along with the skinny jeans. Kevin looked down at the pile of clothes, confused. Is everything okay? Are you moving?" "Oh, ignore that," I said, waving my hand airily. "My husband is just going through a molting season, shedding his old skin. You know how men get in their 60s. Kevin blinked rapidly. He looked terrified. "Come into the living room," I said. "Would you like some tea? It's Earl Grey. Excellent for nerves." I sat him down on the sofa, the one with the slipcover hiding the scratch marks from the cat. Kevin tapped nervously on his tablet. "Mrs. Miller, honestly, I just needed to take some measurements and check the structural integrity for the refinancing application." "Ah, the refinancing," I said, taking a slow sip of my tea. "The one backed by the Sunshine Estates project?" Kevin nodded, relieved that I seemed to know. "Yes, exactly. Quick process, just need to verify the asset value." "Well, Kevin, there's a small hiccup with the asset," I said softly. I leaned forward and placed my tea on the coffee table. "You see, about an hour ago, a lis pendens was filed at the county clerk's office." Kevin stopped tapping. His stylus hovered over the screen. "A what?" "A notice of pending action," I explained, using the voice I used to use when teaching my daughter math. "It means there's a legal claim against this property, specifically a divorce petition involving fraud and dissipation of marital assets, which means this house cannot be sold, refinanced, or used as collateral for a condo in Miami until a judge says so." Kevin's face went pale. In the real estate world, a lis pendens is like a radioactive warning sign. It kills deals instantly. "Mr. Miller didn't mention any legal disputes?" Kevin stammered. "He doesn't know yet," I smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was mine. Surprise. Suddenly, there was a tapping on the window. We both looked. Brenda was pressing her face against the glass, holding a pair of binoculars and squinting aggressively at Kevin. She looked like a deranged neighborhood watch captain. Kevin jumped. "Who is that?" "That's my legal counsel," I lied. "She's very protective." Kevin stood up abruptly. He shoved his tablet into his bag. "Mrs. Miller, I think I need to contact the client. I can't proceed with an appraisal on a disputed property. My liability insurance won't cover it." "A wise choice, Kevin," I said, remaining seated. "Please, show yourself out, and mind the leather jacket on the way out. It's slippery." He practically ran to the door. I heard his car start up seconds later, tires screeching slightly as he peeled out of the driveway. I picked up my tea. It was cold, but it tasted like victory. I knew exactly what Kevin would do next. He would call Robert, and for the first time in 30 years, Robert was going to realize that the furniture in his life had been rearranged without his permission. It took exactly 12 minutes for Kevin to call Robert, and another 2 minutes for Robert to call me. I was in the backyard, kneeling on a foam pad, pulling dandelions from the flower bed near the porch. Gardening had always been my therapy, mostly because Robert hated it. He claimed the pollen messed with his sinuses, though I suspected he just disliked any activity that didn't involve a golf cart. My iPhone, tucked into the pocket of my canvas apron, began to buzz against my hip. It was an aggressive buzz, long, insistent vibrations. I wiped my dirt-stained hands on my jeans and pulled it out. The screen lit up with a photo of Robert I had taken 5 years ago, him grilling a steak, looking confident and in charge. Caller ID, Robert, mobile. I looked at the face on the screen. Then I looked at the dandelion in my other hand, its roots long and twisted, clinging to the earth with stubborn desperation. "You look remarkably similar," I murmured to the weed. I placed the phone face down on the patio table. It continued to vibrate, dancing slightly across the metal mesh surface. Inside the house, the landline began to ring. It was a shrill, piercing sound that cut through the peaceful afternoon chirping of the cardinals. "He's persistent," Brenda said. She was sitting in one of the lawn chairs, nursing a glass of iced tea and watching the phone vibrate with the intensity of a spectator at a boxing match. "That's the ring of panic. I know it well. My second husband rang like that when I sold his boat." "Let it ring," I said, digging my trowel back into the soil. The cell phone stopped. The landline stopped. Silence returned for 10 seconds. Then the cell phone started again. Then the landline. Then, faintly, I heard the ping of a notification on the iPad inside the kitchen. He was trying to FaceTime. He was attacking on all fronts. Barnaby, who had been sleeping on the warm patio stones, woke up. Annoyed by the vibrating phone on the table, he batted it with a paw, knocking it onto the grass. He gave a satisfied huff and went back to sleep. "Good kitty," Brenda cheered. Finally, the ringing stopped, replaced by the digital beep of a voicemail recording. I didn't need to pick up to hear it. I had the volume on high. Robert's voice drifted out from the speaker, tinny and breathless. "Martha? Martha, pick up. Are you there? Listen, I just got a very strange call from an appraiser. Total incompetence. The guy is an idiot. He said something about a legal notice. It's a mistake, obviously. A clerical error at the county. Call me back immediately so I can tell you what to say to them. Do not, I repeat, do not, talk to anyone until we speak. Martha?" His voice cracked on the last Martha. It wasn't the voice of the confident executive. It was the voice of a man realizing his safety net had holes in it. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about what I might say. He wanted to give me a script just like he always did. "Tell them we're fine, Martha. Tell them I'm busy, Martha." I picked up the phone from the grass. It was covered in a light dusting of pollen. "Are you going to call him?" Brenda asked. Crunching on an ice cube, I looked at the battery icon. 4%. "No," I said. "I think I'm going to let the battery die." I walked over to the spigot and turned on the hose. The cool water rushed out, smelling of wet earth and metal. I began to water the hydrangeas, watching the water bead on the leaves. Inside the house, the phone started ringing again. It was desperate now. Manic. I didn't rush to answer it. I didn't feel the old knot of anxiety in my stomach, the one that used to scream, "What did I do wrong?" I just stood there, watering my flowers, realizing that for the first time in 30 years, the silence wasn't something I was enduring. It was something I was inflicting. And it felt powerful. "You missed a spot," Brenda pointed out. gesturing to a patch of dry soil. I have time, I said, watching the sun dip lower behind the fence. I have all the time in the world. He's the one running out of daylight. Night settled over the suburbs like a heavy blanket. The crickets started their nightly chorus, oblivious to the fact that the Miller household was currently under a silent siege. Inside, Brenda and I were conducting a war council over a medium pepperoni pizza. You know, Brenda said, using a pair of kitchen scissors to cut a slice because we couldn't find the pizza wheel. Silence is the loudest noise you can make to a narcissist. It drives them crazy. It's like unplugging their oxygen. He stopped calling, I noted, looking at my phone. It was charging on the counter now, silent and dark. He's reloading, Brenda chewed thoughtfully. He's realized the angry husband voice didn't work and the panicked victim voice didn't work. Now he's figuring out his next character. As if on cue, headlights swept across the living room window. They weren't the yellow halogen beams of Robert's car. They were bright, blue-white LED lights. A small sedan pulled into the driveway. Is that the police? Brenda asked, pausing with a string of cheese hanging from her lip. No, I stood up, smoothing my skirt. It's a Prius. Robert doesn't know anyone who drives a Prius except... I peered through the curtains. A young man was extricating himself from the driver's seat. He looked about 25, wearing a suit that was slightly too big for him, looking terrified. It's Tyler, I sighed. Robert's junior associate at the logistics firm. The poor boy usually just fetches coffee and organizes the charity golf outcome spreadsheets. The doorbell rang. A timid, hesitant press. I opened the door. Tyler stood there, clutching a smartphone in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, if the deer was also sweating profusely. Mrs. Miller? Tyler squeaked. Hi, good evening. Sorry to disturb you. Hello, Tyler, I said warmly. You're working late on a Friday. Yes, well, Mr. Miller, Robert, he asked me to swing by. He's having trouble with his reception in Vegas. Terrible signal. It must be, I said. Especially with all those mountains in the casino. Tyler blinked, unsure if I was joking. He held out the phone. It was on a FaceTime call, but the camera was blacked out. He really needs to speak with you. He says it's an emergency regarding a clerical error at the county office. I looked at the phone. I could hear heavy breathing on the other end. Robert was there listening, hiding behind a black screen and a 25-year-old kid. Tyler, I said gently, have you had dinner? What? Dinner. You look pale. We have pepperoni pizza. It's not homemade, but it's hot. Mrs. Miller, please. He's yelling in my ear, Tyler whispered, looking pained. He thrust the envelope toward me. He just needs you to sign this. It's a revocation of error form. He said if you sign it tonight, he can fix the bank glitch by Monday morning. I didn't take the envelope. I didn't take the phone. I looked directly at the camera lens of Tyler's phone, knowing Robert was watching from his hotel room. Tyler, put the phone on speaker, I said. Tyler, seemingly relieved to not have to relay messages, tapped the screen. Robert? I said. My voice was calm, steady, the voice of the woman who had managed his life for 3 decades. Martha? Robert's voice barked out, tinny and distorted. Finally. Stop this nonsense. You're embarrassing me. Tyler is a colleague. Sign the paper so we can unlock the accounts. You are making a scene over nothing. Robert? I interrupted, cutting through his bluster like a knife through soft butter. Tyler is a nice boy. Stop using him as a shield. I am not. I'm not signing anything, Robert, and I'm not unlocking anything. If you want to discuss the house, or the bank accounts, or the guest on your flight manifest. I paused. The breathing on the other end stopped. Then you can come home. In person. Like a man. I looked at Tyler. You can go, Tyler. Drive safe. And tell your boss that his clerical error is sleeping in the guest room tonight. I gently pushed the phone back toward Tyler's chest and closed the door. I leaned against the wood, listening to Tyler's footsteps retreating down the path. That, Brenda said from the couch, raising her pizza crust in a toast, was better than Dynasty. I exhaled a long, shaky breath. He's coming back, I said. He won't wait until Sunday now. He'll be on the first flight tomorrow morning. Good, Brenda said. Let him come. We haven't even changed the locks yet. I was baking blueberry muffins when Robert came home. It's a strange thing to do during a marital apocalypse, I know. But the rhythm of measuring flour and smashing butter was grounding. Plus, The house smelled of vanilla and sugar, a sharp contrast to the sulphurous mood I knew was about to walk through the door. I heard the taxi screech away. Then, the aggressive jingle of keys. He struggled with the lock. We hadn't changed it yet, but his hands were shaking. The door flew open. Robert stood there. He looked like he had been put through a washing machine on the heavy-duty cycle. His lucky yellow polo was wrinkled and stained with coffee. His hair, usually comb-over perfect, was standing up in a chaotic tuft on the left side. He didn't look like a CEO. He looked like a man who had spent the night in an airport terminal. "Martha," he bellowed, dropping his duffel bag with a heavy thud. Barnaby, who had been guarding the hallway, hissed at him and darted under the sofa. "Hello, Robert," I said, not turning away from the oven. "You're back early. How was the charity golf? Did you win?" He stormed into the kitchen, his face a mottled mix of red and purple. He slapped a piece of paper onto the island counter. It was the Liz Pendens notice. "Is this a joke?" he shouted. Spittle flew from his mouth. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My accounts are frozen. The line of credit is blocked. I had to use my emergency credit card just to buy a ticket home." "Do you want a muffin?" I asked, turning around and placing the tray on the cooling rack. "They're fresh." He looked at me as if I had grown a second head. The disconnect between his rage and my domestic calmness was short-circuiting his brain. "I don't want a damn muffin," he screamed. He grabbed the edge of the counter. "I want you to call the county clerk right now. You're going to tell them you're senile. You're going to tell them you made a mistake. If you don't..." "If I don't, what?" I asked. I picked up my tea, the same cup from Tuesday, washed and refilled. I sat down at the table, the same chair. "If you don't, I will have you declared incompetent," he hissed, leaning over me. "I will take this house, and I will leave you with nothing but that cat." Ahem. Robert spun around. Brenda was sitting in the breakfast nook, partially obscured by a large potted fern. She was wearing a floral tracksuit and working on the Saturday crossword puzzle with a red marker. 7 letters for delusional narcissist, Brenda mused aloud, not looking up. "Does Robert fit? What is she doing here?" Robert sputtered, pointing a shaking finger. "Witness protection," Brenda said, filling in a box. Robert turned back to me, his eyes narrowing. He tried to compose himself, switching tactics. The yelling hadn't worked, so he reached for the charm. The old, rusty tool he hadn't oiled in years. "Martha, honey," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Look, I know you're upset. Maybe I haven't been attentive. But this, freezing our assets? This is financial suicide. We're a team. I was doing this investment for us. For our future." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had shared a bed with for 35 years. And I realized I felt absolutely nothing. No anger. No love. Just the mild annoyance one feels when looking at a stain on the carpet. "Robert," I said softly, "I saw the loan application. I saw the forge marks where you tried to copy my signature. That's not investment. That's a felony." His face went white. The charm evaporated. "You went into my office," he whispered. "I went into our house," I corrected. "And I found the box, Robert. The box of Sarah's drawings. The one you used to level your shoe rack." For a second, he looked confused. He didn't even remember. To him, our daughter's memory was just a piece of cardboard scrap. That forgetfulness was more violent than any slap could have been. "It was just a box," he muttered dismissively. "We have digital copies." I stood up then. I didn't rush. I just rose, claiming my full height. "You're leaving," I said. "This is my house," he roared, slamming his hand on the table. The tea in my cup rippled, but didn't spill. "Technically," Brenda piped up from the corner, "since you used marital funds to set up a fraudulent shell company in Florida, and since Martha filed for separation based on financial misconduct yesterday afternoon, the sheriff considers this a volatile domestic situation." "The sheriff?" Robert laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You think the sheriff cares about..." He stopped. Through the open kitchen window, the sound drifted in. A siren. Not on the highway, but close. Turning onto our street. Then another. Robert looked at the window. Then at me. "You called the police?" he asked, his voice trembling for the first time. "No," I said, taking a bite of my muffin. "I think they called you. Something about tax evasion and a wire transfer to the Caymans that triggered a federal flag? Brenda's friend Doris really knows her banking regulations." Robert backed away from the table. He looked at the back door. I wouldn't run, Robert, I said, sitting back down. You're wearing loafers. You'll slip on the grass. The sirens cut off as two police cruisers pulled up to the curb, their blue and red lights reflecting silently against the white vinyl siding of our house. It was a disco display for a party nobody wanted to attend. Robert looked out the window. His face, usually flushed with the confidence of a man who interrupts people in meetings, was the color of old dough. This is a mistake, he muttered, more to himself than to me. It's a misunderstanding. I'll just explain to them about the liquidity transfer. He walked to the front door, straightening his wrinkled polo shirt, trying to summon the ghost of his authority. I followed him out to the porch. I didn't step down to the driveway. I stayed on the raised platform, leaning against the railing. Brenda stood beside me, holding her phone up. Landscape mode, she whispered to me. Always film in landscape, Martha. It's more cinematic. Two officers stepped out. One was older, tired-looking. The other was young, holding a folder that looked suspiciously like the one Brenda had faxed to the FBI field office yesterday. Robert Miller? The older officer asked. That's me, Robert said, flashing his practiced smile. Officers, I assume this is about the alarm system, or perhaps a noise complaint. My wife was baking and, Mr. Miller, we have a warrant for your arrest regarding wire fraud and tax evasion related to Cayman Holdings and the Sunshine Estates venture. The officer interrupted, his voice flat and bored. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back. The silence on the street was absolute. Across the road, I saw Mrs. Higgins peeking through her blinds. 2 houses down, Mr. Henderson had stopped mowing his lawn to watch. Robert's greatest fear wasn't jail, it was embarrassment. And now, the whole neighborhood had a front row seat. You can't do this, Robert stammered as the cold metal clicked around his wrists. I have a tea time on Tuesday. I have... Martha. He turned his head to look at me. His eyes were wide, desperate. Martha, tell them. Tell them it's a joint account. Tell them you authorized it. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had left his iPad on the table because he thought I was too simple to understand numbers. I looked at the man who had used our daughter's art box to prop up his shoes. I took a sip of my tea. Officer, I called out calmly, please be careful with his back. He thinks he gained muscle, but it's mostly just stress and pasta. The young officer suppressed a smile. They guided Robert into the back of the cruiser. He looked smaller now, hunched over, stripped of his pretenses. He tried to duck his head to avoid the neighbor's gaze, but it was too late. The illusion was shattered. Wait. Robert yelled one last time through the open window as the engine started. Martha, who's going to handle the bail? Who's going to feed the cat? The cat is fine, Robert, I said softly, though he couldn't hear me over the engine. And as for the bail, I think I used that money to fix the roof. The cruiser pulled away, taking the noise and the chaos with it. Brenda stopped recording. Well, she said, pocketing her phone. That's going to get a lot of likes in the group chat. I looked at the empty driveway. The sun was high now. The dandelions I had pulled yesterday were wilting on the path. The air felt lighter, cleaner. I turned back to the open front door of my house. My house. Come on, Brenda, I said. The muffins are ready. 6 months later, the kitchen was different now. I had painted the walls a soft sage green, a color Robert had always said was depressing, but which I found incredibly peaceful. The morning sun poured across the oak table. It was the same table, but the scratches didn't look like scars anymore. They looked like character lines. I sat in my chair, the one facing the window. On the table, there was no iPad, no frantic sticky notes, no unpaid bills hidden under napkins. Instead, there was a fresh pot of Earl Grey, a library book, and a framed watercolor painting of a house with a giant yellow sun. I had framed Sarah's drawing properly, and it now sat in the center of the table, the place of honor it had always deserved. Barnaby jumped up onto the table, something Robert strictly forbade, but which I now allowed on weekends. He purred, rubbing his cheek against my hand. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of 6 months ago. It wasn't the silence of things left unsaid, of eggshells being walked upon, of secrets rotting in the floorboards. It was a clean silence, the kind you find in a forest after a rainstorm. I took a sip of tea. It was hot, strong, and perfect. People often asked me how I did it, How I sat there that morning, saw the betrayal, and didn't scream. How I didn't shatter into a million pieces. I looked at the empty chair opposite me. I didn't miss him. I missed the time I had lost, sure, but I had reclaimed the time I had left. I ran my hand over the smooth wood of the table. I remembered that morning, the cold shock, the decision to sit down and not move until I had a plan. I smiled, a small, private smile just for me and the cat. That wasn't the first quiet moment, of course. The first sign had appeared much earlier, while I was doing laundry. Some silences are not weakness. They're preparation.